I need you to pretend to love me, but don't fall for me," Ethan Whitmore said, his voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent that made Olivia Harper's heart skip a beat, standing in the middle of his penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the city lights like stars scattered across a dark sky. Olivia's eyes widened as she clutched the straps of her tote bag tighter, the weight of unpaid bills and the small debt she carried from her late mother's art studio pressing down on her. And she felt suddenly exposed in her simple outfit, a well-worn blazer over a blouse that had seen better days. The air between them was sharp with tension and disbelief, the kind that makes your pulse drum in your ears, and for a moment Olivia could only manage a whisper. "You want me to pretend?" Ethan's gaze didn't waver, not even as she stepped closer to the window, the lights of New York spilling in and painting her hair in soft golden highlights. And he simply nodded, sliding a sleek leather-bound folder across his polished mahogany desk toward her. She hesitated, glancing at the papers, her fingers brushing the smooth cover, heart racing, the idea of agreeing to something so surreal feeling both impossible and strangely alluring. "It's just for appearances," Ethan continued, his voice lowering, as if sharing a secret with the night itself. 5 events, no crossing boundaries, no real feelings. You play the part, I handle the rest. Olivia's mind spun, the logic clashing with the flutter of nervous excitement in her chest. The apartment she rented on the Upper East Side suddenly feeling miles away from the cold, glassy perfection surrounding her, and she thought of the little gallery tucked between the brownstones where she had once dreamed of holding her own art show. She bit her lip, weighed her options, and realized that for once, the practical choice might actually serve a fleeting fantasy of escape from bills and a life measured in rent and overdue notices. I don't even know you," she managed, voice trembling. Yet the edge of curiosity and a hint of thrill broke through the initial shock, and Ethan allowed a flicker of a smile, his piercing blue eyes softening just enough to betray a tiny crack in his carefully controlled demeanor. The city hummed faintly below, taxis weaving like tiny sparks. The distant wail of sirens barely audible, yet in the hushed enormity of his office, it felt as if time had stilled, holding its breath alongside Olivia. She finally nodded, almost imperceptibly, a silent agreement that set the wheels of their unusual arrangement into motion, unaware that the very act of saying yes would begin unraveling the careful armor around Ethan's heart. He gestured toward the window, a subtle invitation to step closer, and as Olivia approached, the tension between them morphed into a fragile thread of connection, the kind that trembles in the presence of possibility. And for the first time, she noticed the gentleness in his posture, the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the rare vulnerability hidden behind the polished, formidable exterior of a billionaire. Her mind raced, thoughts flicking from the absurdity of the contract to the dizzying height of the office and the city sprawling endlessly beneath them. Yet beneath it all, a spark of intrigue ignited, the kind that made her pulse quicken and a soft, unacknowledged smile tug at the corner of her lips as Ethan's voice broke the silence again, low and earnest. "Remember, Olivia, it's just a game. But sometimes, even games can change you." Olivia stepped out of the penthouse, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, the city lights casting a golden glow across the lobby as she clutched her tote closer, thinking about the unusual arrangement she had just agreed to, and the weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her shoulders like the familiar chill of early November. She navigated the elevator in silence, her mind racing with calculations of rent due, art supply bills, and the looming promise of reopening her late mother's gallery, a dream she had nurtured since her teenage years. And yet somehow the thought of participating in Ethan Whitmore's orchestrated events filled her with an inexplicable tension, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, the kind that made her stomach flutter in ways she could not ignore. By the time she reached the street, the crisp night air had bitten through her coat, brushing her cheeks with a sharpness that reminded her she was still grounded in reality, that her world of modest apartments and part-time shifts at the local art supply store had not yet changed, and she drew a deep breath, allowing the cityscape to settle her racing thoughts, the hum of traffic below and the soft hiss of tires on wet asphalt blending into a background rhythm that felt oddly soothing. Crossing the street, Olivia found herself thinking about the small, faded sketches she carried in her tote, reminders of evenings spent alone with graphite and watercolors, the quiet hours in the corner of her bedroom where dreams had felt tangible and alive, and she wondered if participating in Ethan's arrangement would somehow bring those dreams closer to the light or further out of reach. The next morning, she arrived at the first event, a charity luncheon in one of the city's more elegant hotels, and her pulse quickened as she stepped into the grand ballroom, the crystal chandeliers catching the sunlight and scattering it across the polished floor, and she adjusted her blazer nervously, hoping her manners and poise would carry her through without exposing the raw edges of inexperience. Ethan was already there, standing with effortless grace near the entrance, scanning the room with a practiced eye that made him seem untouchable yet somehow approachable, and when he caught her gaze, his lips curved in a slight, approving smile, a gesture that both calmed and unnerved her. They moved together through introductions and conversations, Olivia learning the choreography of smiles and polite nods, the subtle art of holding a wine glass with elegance, the measured laughter that signals social ease, and with each interaction, she felt a cautious confidence grow, a sense that maybe she could navigate this world, even temporarily, and the oddest thing was how Ethan's presence anchored her, his occasional glance or whispered guidance serving as a tether in the swirling tide of unfamiliar faces and polished etiquette. Between guests, he leaned close and murmured a few practical tips, not condescending but gently guiding, and Olivia realized with a start that she was already attuned to his subtle cues, reading shifts in tone and glance, adjusting her own posture and voice, and noticing how the simple act of paying attention made the interaction feel less like a performance and more like a quiet collaboration. By the end of the luncheon, Olivia found a quiet corner near the window, her hands resting lightly on the tote strap as she watched the street far below, the city alive with movement, and she allowed herself a small exhale, feeling the unusual mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that came from walking the fine line between pretense and authenticity. And as Ethan approached to offer a gentle nod and a reassuring smile, she could not help but wonder how this temporary arrangement might evolve, how the lines between agreement and genuine feeling could begin to blur in ways she had not anticipated, the seed of curiosity planted deep within her mind. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the private art gallery where the first official event of the contract was being held, the polished oak floors reflecting the warm light from the chandeliers above, and she took a moment at the entrance to steady her breath, adjusting her skirt and smoothing down the blazer she had carefully chosen the night before, feeling the familiar pang of nerves mixed with excitement as she stepped further into the space filled with patrons, the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses forming a steady backdrop to the swirl of anticipation inside her. Ethan Whitmore stood near a grand display of abstract sculptures, his tailored suit perfectly fitted, exuding an air of effortless confidence that both intimidated and intrigued her, and when their eyes met across the room, a subtle nod passed between them, an acknowledgement of the delicate dance they were about to perform. Olivia moved through the crowd with careful poise, greeting donors and guests with practiced smiles, her voice steady but her heart racing as she fielded questions about the pieces on display, describing the artists and their intentions with genuine enthusiasm that she hoped would not betray her inexperience with such formal settings. Between conversations, Ethan would glide up beside her, offering a quiet word of encouragement, a small correction to her posture, or a hint on how to respond to an unexpected inquiry, his presence grounding her and lending a surprising ease to the performance she was giving. And Olivia found herself noticing the way he observed her, the way his eyes lingered on a gesture or a laugh, a subtle appreciation that felt far more personal than the formality surrounding them. As the evening progressed, the gallery manager approached with a minor issue regarding a misprinted catalog, and Olivia immediately stepped forward to address it, offering a calm solution and ensuring the guests remained unaware of the oversight. And Ethan watched with an expression that blended admiration and quiet surprise, the first visible acknowledgement that her abilities went beyond mere appearances. After the crowd had thinned slightly, they moved to a quieter section of the gallery, where the glow from floor lamps cast soft shadows across the walls, and Olivia allowed herself to exhale, the adrenaline of the public performance giving way to a private sense of accomplishment, and Ethan's voice broke the brief silence. Gentle but deliberate. You handled that perfectly. I did not expect such composure. Olivia felt a warmth rise to her cheeks, a mixture of pride and the subtle thrill of validation. And for the first time since agreeing to the arrangement, she sensed that the lines between pretense and authenticity were beginning to blur in ways neither of them had anticipated. She glanced at him, curious about the quiet intensity in his gaze, and found herself imagining how it might feel to navigate not only these orchestrated moments, but the unscripted interactions that could follow, the thought both thrilling and disorienting. And as the night drew to a close and the last guests departed, Olivia lingered by a large window overlooking the city, the lights sparkling like distant constellations, and Ethan came to stand beside her, a hand lightly brushing against hers. A silent gesture that spoke volumes, and she realized that even within the boundaries of their agreement, a delicate bond was forming, subtle but undeniable, hinting at emotions neither had expected to experience yet could not ignore. And as they shared a quiet smile, the city humming softly below, the weight of possibility hung in the air, a promise of moments yet to come and the gentle unfolding of something far more profound than either had planned. The following evening, Olivia found herself standing in the soft glow of the rooftop garden, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the planters that lined the terrace, and she adjusted her scarf as she scanned the city skyline, the lights twinkling like distant fireflies against the darkening sky, feeling a sense of anticipation mixed with a lingering unease about the evolving nature of her arrangement with Ethan Whitmore. Ethan arrived moments later, his presence calm but commanding, a tailored overcoat draped over his shoulders, and he offered a gentle nod, a silent acknowledgement of the shared understanding between them that had grown through the events and interactions of the past days, a quiet rhythm forming that neither had expected but both had come to rely upon. As they walked slowly along the stone pathway, their conversation began cautiously, each word measured, a balance between light banter and subtle probes into personal thoughts, the kind of dialogue that hints at curiosity while maintaining the boundaries of the agreement. And Olivia found herself opening slightly, revealing small fragments of her past, the late nights working at her mother's gallery, the pressure of mounting bills, and the quiet dreams that kept her moving forward despite the weight of reality. Ethan listened intently, his gaze unwavering yet soft, and in that attentive silence, Olivia began to sense a shift, the line between the performed relationship and genuine connection blurring in small, almost imperceptible ways, the moments of shared laughter and subtle understanding weaving a thread that tugged at both of them in unexpected directions. The rooftop garden became a private world, removed from the formality of the galleries and charity events, a space where gestures mattered more than words, and Olivia noticed the way Ethan's hand hovered near hers at intervals, not pressing, not intruding, but present, a subtle signal of support and attention that made her chest warm with an unfamiliar comfort. They paused near a wrought iron railing, looking down at the bustling streets below, and Ethan offered a rare, unguarded smile, remarking on a passerby or a stray taxi, and Olivia laughed softly, the sound mingling with the gentle rustle of leaves, a moment so ordinary yet charged with a sense of intimacy that neither could fully articulate. The night stretched on, filled with quiet exchanges and the occasional glance that held more than politeness, and Olivia realized that within the structure of their agreement, a genuine trust had begun to form, an understanding that extended beyond the carefully drawn rules, and for the first time, she wondered whether this temporary arrangement could evolve into something real, something neither contract nor performance dictated. As they finally turned to leave the rooftop, Ethan's voice broke the comfortable silence, low and reflective, hinting at the care and consideration beneath his polished exterior, and Olivia felt a subtle thrill at the awareness that in this carefully orchestrated world of appearances, both of them were discovering new possibilities, the faintest spark of something unexpected yet undeniably present, a connection that neither could ignore. And as the doors closed behind them, the city lights stretched endlessly. Ahead, a canvas upon which the next chapter of their intertwined paths would begin to take shape. The following morning, Olivia arrived at the spacious conference room of Ethan Whitmore's corporate office. The sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows casting soft patterns across the polished marble floors, and she took a deep breath, straightening her blazer and checking the notes she had prepared, a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation fluttering in her stomach as she thought about the day ahead. Ethan was already there, reviewing the agenda with his assistant, his expression composed yet carrying the subtle intensity that always made her aware of his presence even from a distance. And when he noticed her entering, he offered a small nod and a brief smile, a silent gesture that spoke volumes about their growing familiarity and mutual respect. The morning unfolded with back-to-back meetings and introductions to key clients and partners, and Olivia navigated the interactions with careful attention, answering questions, exchanging polite pleasantries, and gradually finding a rhythm, her voice confident, her demeanor composed. Yet every now and then her eyes flicked toward Ethan, noting the quiet ways he observed her, the approving nods, the subtle gestures of guidance that never crossed into control but offered reassurance. During a brief pause, Ethan led her to a smaller meeting space adjacent to the main conference room, and for a moment, the ambient noise of the city seemed to fade, leaving only the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of colleagues moving through the hallways. And in that quiet space, he offered her feedback in a low, conversational tone, highlighting the strengths she had shown and gently suggesting small adjustments that could elevate her performance even further. Olivia listened intently, absorbing every word, feeling a growing sense of accomplishment and the surprising warmth of connection that had begun to develop between them, a subtle undercurrent of trust and mutual understanding that went beyond the confines of their arrangement. As the morning progressed into early afternoon, they moved together through additional presentations and networking sessions, Olivia noticing how Ethan's presence made interactions smoother, his quiet confidence reflecting positively on her, and creating an atmosphere in which she felt empowered to contribute authentically rather than simply performing a role. By the time the day drew toward a close, Olivia found herself standing near the expansive windows overlooking the city streets below, her posture relaxed, the earlier tension replaced by a quiet satisfaction and anticipation for the evenings to come, and Ethan joined her, offering a shared moment of reflection on the day's successes, a brief conversation filled with unspoken acknowledgement of the partnership they had formed, the subtle interplay of guidance and support, and the tentative hints of deeper feelings developing between them, leaving Olivia with a sense of curiosity and wonder about what the next steps in their unusual arrangement might reveal, the city sprawling endlessly beneath them, as if mirroring the possibilities that now seemed to stretch before them both. That evening, Olivia found herself walking through the quiet streets of the city, the sky a deep indigo, and the streetlights casting long reflections on the damp pavement, her thoughts still lingering on the subtle interactions with Ethan Whitmore during the day, the way his attention had shifted ever so slightly toward her in moments that had seemed ordinary but carried an unspoken significance. She turned a corner into a small, secluded park, the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city providing a private backdrop for reflection, and she pulled her coat tighter around her, feeling both the chill of the air and the warmth of the anticipation building inside her, a tension born from the growing awareness that their arrangement was becoming more than a simple contract. Ethan appeared beside her almost silently, as if stepping out from the shadows, and offered a calm, reassuring presence, his hand lightly brushing the strap of her bag in a gesture that conveyed both connection and support without overstepping the boundaries they had set, and Olivia felt a momentary surge of comfort, the steady rhythm of his footsteps beside her grounding her amidst the swirl of emotions. They walked together in near silence, exchanging occasional observations about the city lights or a passerby, small talk masking the deeper acknowledgement of the bond forming between them, and Olivia found herself noticing the subtle ways in which he adjusted his posture when walking next to her, the gentle tilt of his head when listening, the brief but meaningful glances that seemed to convey more than words could, each moment weaving threads of intimacy that had begun to feel natural rather than orchestrated. Reaching a quiet bench, they paused, and Olivia allowed herself to sit, her gaze drifting to the skyline where the lights of the buildings reflected softly on the river, a calm moment punctuated only by Ethan's voice breaking the silence with a low, thoughtful observation about the day's successes and the challenges they had navigated, and she felt her heart lift slightly, buoyed by the quiet confidence and understated encouragement in his tone. As the conversation flowed, she shared small personal anecdotes, moments from her childhood and early art projects, and Ethan listened with genuine interest, nodding occasionally and asking gentle questions that invited her to expand without pressure, and Olivia realized that in these private moments, the lines between performance and authenticity were shifting, the walls they had both maintained beginning to show cracks that allowed glimpses of sincerity and vulnerability. The night grew deeper, and a soft breeze carried the scent of nearby flowers as Ethan suggested they take a slow walk back toward the avenue, his presence calm and steady, a quiet anchor that allowed Olivia to relax further and consider the possibilities unfolding between them. The gentle interplay of gestures, attention, and conversation marking the transformation from a structured agreement into the beginnings of genuine connection. With each step, the unspoken tension that had been building over days of meetings, events, and shared experiences settled into a comfortable rhythm, a mutual awareness of feelings developing beneath the surface, subtle yet undeniable. And as they approached the brightly lit street leading back to their respective worlds, Olivia realized that this evening had planted seeds of trust and curiosity, a promise that the arrangement was evolving into something far richer than either had anticipated, leaving her with a sense of anticipation and hope for the next moments they would share together. The following evening, Olivia arrived at the gala event with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, the grand ballroom buzzing with the chatter of influential guests, the crystal chandeliers scattering light across the polished marble floors, and the soft notes of a string quartet weaving through the air, creating an atmosphere of elegance and expectation. She adjusted her dress and smoothed her hair, feeling the weight of every eye in the room as she stepped forward, the sense of performing within the arrangement mingling with a growing awareness of the genuine connection forming with Ethan Whitmore, who stood nearby with a composed demeanor, surveying the crowd with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to influence and attention. The evening began smoothly, with introductions and polite conversation, but a subtle tension entered the space when an influential client approached Ethan with a pointed question about a recent business decision, and Olivia, noticing a slight frown on his otherwise calm face, instinctively offered a measured response, drawing on the knowledge and guidance he had shared during their earlier interactions. Ethan glanced at her with a quiet nod, a signal of approval that sent a surge of confidence through Olivia, and for a brief moment, the world narrowed to the two of them navigating this microcrisis together, the collaboration feeling remarkably intimate despite the public setting. As the event continued, a whisper of misunderstanding circulated among some of the guests regarding Ethan's attention toward Olivia, the suggestion that she was more than a temporary companion for appearances, and the implication reached her ears through the subtle cues of concerned colleagues, causing a flicker of doubt and unease to rise within her, questioning whether the boundaries of their agreement were being tested too far, and whether the feelings stirring between them were becoming visible to everyone around. Ethan noticed the shift in her expression, the way her posture tightened slightly, and her gaze darted nervously across the room, and he approached her with a gentle smile, offering quiet reassurance. "Ignore the noise, focus on what we know," he murmured, his voice carrying both authority and warmth, a tether to the trust they had cultivated in private moments. Olivia nodded, taking a steadying breath, and together they navigated the remainder of the evening, attending speeches, greeting guests, and participating in a group toast, each movement choreographed with the subtle understanding that had grown between them, the tension of public scrutiny softened by their synchronized presence. At the conclusion of the gala, as the crowd began to thin and the staff moved to clear the room, Ethan led Olivia to a quiet balcony overlooking the city skyline, the lights twinkling below like a sea of stars, and he paused, his eyes holding hers with a sincerity that could not be ignored, the vulnerability of the moment contrasting sharply with the composed exterior he maintained throughout the night. Olivia felt her heart flutter, caught between the thrill of connection and the lingering fear of misinterpretation, and in the hush of the balcony, with the city sprawling endlessly beneath them, They shared a quiet conversation that allowed both to acknowledge, without words of obligation, the growing emotions that had emerged, the subtle realization that the boundaries of their agreement had shifted and that trust, respect, and perhaps the beginnings of genuine affection had taken root in the spaces between contracts and expectations, leaving them both contemplating the possibilities that lay ahead beyond the structured confines of their arrangement. The following weekend, Olivia stepped into the gallery that Ethan Whitmore had quietly arranged to celebrate her own artwork. The space transformed with soft spotlights illuminating her pieces, each canvas and sketch framed carefully, as if the walls themselves were whispering recognition of her talent, and the familiar scent of fresh paint mingled with the subtle aroma of polished wood, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and momentous. Guests began to arrive, their murmured compliments and curious glances filling the room with gentle energy. Yet Olivia's focus remained on the collection before her, her hands lightly brushing the edges of the frames, her mind racing with disbelief and gratitude, and she turned to find Ethan standing at the entrance, his expression a mix of pride and quiet anticipation. The usual confident composure softened by a hint of vulnerability she had never seen before. "I wanted you to see this," he said, his voice steady but warm, carrying a sincerity that made her pause, the reality of the gesture sinking in, and Olivia felt a lump rise in her throat as she looked around the gallery that had been prepared entirely in her honor, every detail reflecting an understanding of her passion and her journey that went far beyond the superficial. As the evening unfolded, they moved through the gallery together, Ethan guiding her to each piece and allowing her to share her thoughts and memories associated with them, his attention unwavering, his presence steady, and Olivia realized that the careful boundaries they had maintained were giving way to a genuine appreciation that could not be captured by words alone, the gestures, glances, and subtle expressions conveying a depth of respect and affection that neither had openly acknowledged before. The crowd mingled around them, but the private moments persisted in between conversations, the quiet pauses as they discussed color choices or the inspiration behind a sketch, the small hand gestures, the shared smiles, creating a language of understanding and connection that transcended the initial arrangement, and Olivia found herself laughing freely, her chest light, her nerves eased by the genuine engagement and encouragement Ethan offered without expectation or pressure. At one point, Ethan reached into his coat pocket and produced a small, elegant envelope, handing it to her with a gentle, almost shy gesture, and Olivia opened it to find a simple note, a few heartfelt sentences expressing his admiration and pride in her work, and the sincerity in his handwriting reflected a depth of feeling that went beyond professional courtesy or social expectation. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and in that instant, the carefully maintained roles of contract and pretense dissolved, leaving only the honest, unguarded connection between them, a recognition of shared respect, admiration, and something more subtle but undeniably present, a tender seed of affection that had been quietly growing. The gallery buzzed around them, but in their shared focus, time seemed to slow, each moment stretching with significance, the careful orchestration of the evening highlighting not only her achievements, but also the genuine care and thoughtfulness Ethan had invested, and Olivia felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and the quiet thrill of realizing that the temporary arrangement had evolved into a profound acknowledgement of her worth and the possibilities of a future that might extend far beyond the initial boundaries they had set together. The following evening, Ethan Whitmore led Olivia Harper to the center of the gallery, now quiet after the last guests had departed, the soft glow of the spotlights highlighting the collection she had poured her heart into, and he paused, letting the silence settle between them, a calm anticipation hanging in the air. He turned toward her, his usual composed demeanor softened, eyes reflecting a depth of feeling he had been holding back, and he reached into his pocket, producing a small, velvet box that seemed to glow in the warm light, and Olivia's breath caught as he knelt slightly, the gesture both intimate and sincere. "Olivia," he began, his voice steady yet full of emotion. "These past weeks have been more than I expected, more than a temporary arrangement. I came to admire your talent, your dedication, and your heart, and I realize that my feelings have grown beyond any agreement we made. She looked down, heart pounding, feeling the weight of the moment, the unspoken connection that had been developing finally given voice. And she noticed the sincerity in every line of his face, the way his hand held the box with care, offering not just a ring, but a promise of commitment and acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. Olivia's lips parted slightly, eyes glistening as she processed the scene, the gallery around them fading into background as the significance of this gesture filled the space between them, and she felt a mixture of relief, surprise, and happiness, the culmination of tension, trust, and genuine affection built over days of shared moments, quiet guidance, and subtle understanding. Ethan's voice continued, gentle but firm. I want this to be real, Olivia. Not a performance, not a contract, but a life we can share, built on respect, admiration, and something neither of us can ignore any longer. She stepped closer, her hands brushing his, feeling the warmth of the connection that had grown steadily, the delicate dance of pretense now giving way to authenticity, and with a soft, steady exhale, she nodded, the smallest smile curving her lips, signaling acceptance, understanding, and shared commitment. He opened the box fully, revealing a simple yet elegant ring, its design reflecting understated sophistication and thoughtfulness, and she reached out, taking it in her hand, the metal cool and solid, a tangible reminder of the intangible trust and affection between them, and in that instant, all the careful boundaries of the arrangement dissolved, leaving only the reality of their choice to embrace the feelings they had both discovered. They stood together, the gallery a silent witness to the moment, and Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger with a tender smile, her hand fitting perfectly in his, their eyes meeting in a shared acknowledgement of everything that had passed and everything that lay ahead, the city lights outside twinkling like distant stars, and for the first time, both felt unreserved, unguarded, and completely present. The journey from pretense to authenticity complete, and as they embraced briefly, the gallery seemed to hum with quiet approval, a space filled with art, emotion, and the promise of a shared future, the culmination of trust, care, and the gentle evolution of love built through moments of guidance, patience, and sincere connection.